Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're plunging headfirst into something that might seem surprisingly, well, deep. Boredom.
Yeah, boredom. It feels like such a simple, everyday feeling, doesn't it?
Totally. But, thinkers for millennia have been wrestling with what boredom actually is, why we all experience it, and maybe what it's trying to tell us about ourselves and the world.
Absolutely. You sent over some really fascinating material exploring these ideas.
Yeah, and we're about to unpack some of the most insightful perspectives, I think.
Exactly. And we know listeners want to get a solid hander on this without getting totally lost in, academic jargon.
Right. So our mission today is to highlight the key philosophical viewpoints and maybe some of those real aha moments they offer.
It's easy to just dismiss boredom, isn't it? But as Joseph Epstein pointed out, when it comes to consciousness, and boredom's definitely part of that, neurologists often have less to say than poets and philosophers. And, well, our sources show boredom has been a pretty significant subject for thinkers throughout history.
Definitely. And the questions these philosophers have been asking are surprisingly wide-ranging. I mean, our sources highlight a whole bunch.
Like what?
Well, first, what is boredom? Is there just one type or many? What does it actually feel like? The phenomenology of it.
Okay.
Then there's the practical side. What can we actually do about it? How do we overcome it? Or maybe just live with it?
Practical questions, sure, but it goes deeper.
Oh, absolutely. What does boredom reveal about the really big questions, like the meaning of life, human nature, even the nature of reality itself?
Wow. Okay.
And what does boredom actually produce or explain? Is it some kind of fundamental state of mind we all share?
And what conditions bring it on? Who feels it most?
Exactly. And even ethical questions pop up.
It's really crucial to get why boredom lands so firmly in the philosophical court, isn't it?
Yeah, it's not just biology or psychology.
Or sociology or just statistics. Pinpointing its essence really needs some deep conceptual thinking and looking closely at the experience itself, the phenomenology.
That idea of really focusing on the feeling of it.
Right, what it feels like to be bored, not just defining it abstractly. Plus, the fact that people often struggle to even say if they're bored. That messes up statistical studies.
Good point.
And like you said, those really big metaphysical questions. Classic philosophy territory.
So to guide us on this deep dive, we'll be referencing some key texts, right?
Yep. Specifically, L. Svensson's A Philosophy of Boredom, P. Tuhi's Boredom, a lively history, and some really interesting bits from Heidegger's fundamental concepts of metaphysics.
Got it.
And one of the interesting debates that comes up is, well, is boredom timeless? Has it always been with us?
Or is it more of a modern thing, a product of our times?
Exactly. We'll look at some early perspectives that suggest it's definitely been around for a while.
Okay, let's do that. Let's head way back in time. First stop, the ancient world, and maybe Solomon.
Go ahead. Yeah, the traditional author of Ecclesiastes, around 200 BCE. He definitely sounds like someone familiar with something like boredom.
It's not like a formal treatise, though.
No, not at all. It's more a raw expression of the feeling itself. But he also touches on causes and, maybe more importantly, how to cope.
So even back then, they felt life could be meaningless.
Seems like it. And the proposed fix was surprisingly simple. Embrace everyday joys. Maybe a bit of a Band-Aid for a deeper ache,
Yeah, the feeling just leaps off the page. Lines like, vanity of vanities, all is vanity. That sets a tone of, well, pointlessness.
Totally.
And then, the eye is not satisfied with seeing, nor the ear filled with hearing. That sense of nothing ever quite being enough.
That constant dissatisfaction.
And phrases like, all my toil was vanity and a striving after wind, and that really stark one, I hated life. I mean, that sounds like someone deeply grappling with a lack of meaning.
Absolutely. And the reasons he gives, they still resonate. This sense that nothing truly satisfies, that life is just a repetitive cycle.
What has been is what will be.
Exactly. Nothing new under the sun, that endless repetition breeding futility.
And his advice for dealing with this, well, it's surprisingly practical, maybe a bit underwhelming for someone in a deep existential funk, right?
Yeah.
He says, go, eat your bread with joy and drink your wine with a merry heart. It's all about embracing simple pleasures, finding joy in the everyday, getting on with tasks.
It almost sounds like advice for just feeling a bit down, not having a full-blown crisis.
Right. Makes you wonder if the ancient understanding was maybe a bit more surface level, or if that's really enough to pull someone out of that vanity of vanities mood.
It does feel a bit like a Band-Aid on a much deeper wound, maybe.
Yeah.
But it shows an early attempt to navigate this feeling, even if the solution seems limited.
Okay, so our next ancient stop is Seneca, the Roman Stoic, around 4 BCE to 65 CE.
Right, and his essay on tranquility, written for his friend Serene.
Who Seneca clearly thought was prone to a life leading towards boredom, though Serene's own description wasn't exactly what we'd call boredom today.
That's a key point. Seneca, based on what Serene said, identifies what he sees as the core elements. He points to two sides of it. On one hand, this sort of inconstancy and restlessness, always shifting focus. On the other, a lack of motivation, interest, a weariness, lethargy, even yawning.
So even then, seeing it as having different facets, agitation and apathy.
Exactly. And Seneca paints such a vivid picture of how it feels.
Yeah, he talks about the agitation of a mind that cannot find a way out.
And the dulling of a soul that lies torpid amidst abandoned hopes.
And that inability to cope with being alone, like the mind is desperately...
Restlessness, even hating leisure, trying to escape through constant distraction, travel, new sights.
That question he poses, how long shall I endure the same things? That really captures the feeling of being trapped.
He does. And his advice for Serene, very stoic.
Get involved. Practical affairs, public service.
Yep, purposeful action, contributing to the community as a way to find meaning and, ward off that inner turmoil.
So from Seneca, we get an early, really insightful description of the feeling.
Both the restlessness and the lack of interest.
And understanding it can lead to other negative states, like melancholy.
Right.
And a practical suggestion, purposeful activity.
Exactly.
Okay, moving into the medieval period, we find this concept called acedia.
Acedia. Yeah, not exactly our modern boredom, but definitely an interesting precursor, especially in religious life.
The noonday demon, sometimes called.
That's the one. It was a kind of spiritual apathy or listlessness, often hitting monks and hermits. More than just feeling down, it was specifically boredom with God and religious duties.
The term itself means like a lack of care, spiritual sloth.
Roughly, yeah, which points to the key thing.
The strong negative ethical spin. Being bored with God was seen as a serious spiritual failing.
Precisely. Something needing urgent correction. Toohey's book goes deeper into it, but for us, the important link is this historical connection between a form of boredom and a sense of moral or spiritual lack.
Got it. Okay, let's fast forward to the early modern period. Blaise Pascal, 17th century France.
Ah, Pascal. Now he takes boredom to a whole different level. Much deeper, more passionate, as the source says, especially in the Pensées.
The section on the misery of man without God.
Right. And his central idea is pretty stark.
That boredom is our natural state, without distractions.
Exactly. He argues that without diversions, we're just naturally bored. It's not occasional, it's fundamental, our default when left alone.
And diversion is huge for him. People constantly seeking distractions, work, fun, anything.
Anything to avoid facing the emptiness inside.
Yeah.
But he says it doesn't ultimately work, right?
Right. Temporary relief, maybe, but the underlying void remains. We always circle back to boredom, which he sees as the appropriate response to that emptiness.
His description of the bored, weary person is quite striking. He really emphasizes that this ennui is the natural human condition without God.
But he does offer a way out, doesn't he?
He does. His solution is a relationship with an infinite God. Only that connection, he argues, can truly fill the void and get rid of the restlessness, the weariness, the boredom.
A very theological answer.
Very. Which contrasts sharply with our next thinker from that period, Immanuel Kant.
Ah, Kant, 18th century. His remarks on boredom are more kind of passing comments in his lectures on ethics.
Yeah, less central than for Pascal. And his take is quite different, less spiritual, more focused on activity itself.
Kant's view is basically that boredom hits the inactive, the idle.
Pretty much. Those with nothing to occupy their time and minds.
And his cure?
Simply activity, engaging in work or recreation. He thought lazy people don't find true rest, but active people do.
So a clear split. Pascal points to God.
Well, Kant offers a much more secular solution. Just stay engaged with the world.
Okay, let's move into the 19th century. This is where boredom really seems to take center stage philosophically.
Definitely. And we have to start with Arthur Schopenhauer, the great German pessimist.
He makes boredom absolutely central, doesn't he?
He does. Famously argues it's one of the two fundamental poles of human existence, the other being need or want.
So life is just swinging back and forth.
Yeah, between the dissatisfaction of desiring something and the emptiness of boredom once you get it. His will to live is this constant striving, and boredom arises when that will is temporarily quieted, leaving this empty void.
Right. It's like we're always chasing something, and even when we catch it, the satisfaction fades, replaced by what now?
Exactly. This endless cycle of wanting, being bored.
Hmm.
And Schopenhauer sees both as forms of misery.
And he actually defines it, right? One of the first explicit definitions.
Yeah, he calls it a tamed desire without any particular object, that underlying restlessness, wanting something but not knowing what.
But he goes beyond just defining it. He gives a really substantive explanation.
He does. Arguing boredom is basically the feeling of the uselessness of existence. He even suggests it could be evidence that life itself lacks inherent value.
How so?
Well, if life had intrinsic reasons, just being alive should be enough to delight us. Boredom wouldn't exist.
Wow. That's bleak.
It is Schopenhauer. And here's where it gets really interesting. He links boredom to intelligence.
Oh, yeah. How?
He thinks animals feel very little boredom, but humans are susceptible in direct proportion to their intelligence. It takes a rich world to keep a smart person engaged, and reality often falls short.
So being easily bored means you're smarter.
In his view, yes. Those content with mundane things are just less intelligent. It's a provocative idea.
Definitely provocative. Are there exceptions in his view?
A few. Those lost in artistic contemplation, especially music, and those who've negated the will to live, sages, saints, mystics. But he admits very few reach that state.
So for most intelligent people, boredom is just unavoidable.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Long stretches of it are part of life, and he doesn't downplay it. He sees it as genuine misery, a scourge that can lead to death or even drive people to extreme things like war, just to escape it.
Okay, switching gears a bit within the 19th century, Henry David Thoreau. He offers a real contrast to Schopenhauer.
A fascinating contrast. Thoreau doesn't write tons specifically on boredom, but his remarks give an almost opposite view on that intelligence link.
He actually says boredom is as old as Adam,
Yeah,
right?
He does, anticipating later debates. But where he really differs from Schopenhauer is on who gets bored. Thoreau thought it was the less intelligent, the less mentally active, those more asleep, as he put it.
So completely flipped from Schopenhauer. It shows how they had different ideas about what intelligence or engagement even means.
Yes, exactly. For Thoreau, boredom is the state of the mentally limited, those not truly awake to the world. An alert, intelligent mind always finds fascination.
He has that great analogy, doesn't he? Moral reform is getting rid of sleep.
Right. And how millions are awake for physical work, but few for intellectual or poetic or divine life.
His point is that reality, if you truly perceive it, is always stimulating, sublime even.
So if you're bored, according to Thoreau, it's not because you're smart, but because you're failing to engage with the richness of existence. A lack of attention, almost.
Okay, next up. Søren Kierkegaard, another 19th century figure with quite a few angles on boredom.
Kierkegaard takes it very seriously, like Schopenhauer. He even claims, maybe exaggerating a bit, that it's the root of all evil.
Wow. Even if that's hyperbole, his idea of boredom as this pervasive nothingness or demonic pantheism, that sounds pretty profound and unsettling.
It is, this sense of emptiness permeating everything.
And what's fascinating is his idea that this very nothingness can paradoxically spur us into action, a negative stimulus.
Right. Strange that something so inert can drive us, like we're trying to escape the feeling itself, and that escape becomes the engine for doing things. He calls it magical, that instigating character.
And then there's his rather cynical take on boredom as a status symbol.
Ah, yes, that it belongs to the socially elevated.
His quip, "Those who bore others are the plebeians. Those who bore themselves are the chosen ones, the nobility."
That feels almost too relevant today, doesn't it? Cultivating ennui to seem sophisticated.
It's a sharp observation about boredom as a mark of distinction, yeah.
Okay, our final 19th century stop. Friedrich Nietzsche. He doesn't have one big text on boredom, but scattered remarks that are really insightful.
And Nietzsche kind of flips the script, seeing even negative things like boredom as potential drivers for culture, for spiritual development.
Exactly. Suggesting that what we try to avoid might actually shape us profoundly. One of his key points is that boredom helps explain Christian and aesthetic ideals.
How so?
He sees them partly as attempts to combat boredom. Like on the genealogy of morality, he talks about aesthetic ideals letting the weak feel too good for the world, a holy form of orgiastic excess, fighting their pain and boredom.
And a similar idea in the Antichrist.
Yeah, suggesting the focus on sin, self-criticism, conscious checking in Christianity could be seen as a kind of pastime, a remedy for boredom for the oppressed.
And he even playfully suggests boredom explains everything in that Genesis retelling.
Right, God gets bored, creates man. Man gets bored, God creates animals, then woman. It's tongue-in-cheek, but highlights boredom's potential power, maybe as a creative force, even if cynically put.
But he also says some positive things about it.
He does. He agrees with Schopenhauer. It can signal vitality, intelligence, and kind of looking ahead to Heidegger, he suggests blocking out all boredom might cut us off from our deeper selves.
And that funny observation about helping the suffering just to cure our own boredom?
A bit cynical, maybe true. But he's not all pro-boredom. He warns against becoming holy and boring just by being honest. Life's too short for that.
And that darkly funny bit about higher education turning people into machines via duty, the philologist grinding away.
A memorable image. Lastly, for the 19th century, William James, the American pragmatist.
Right. Principles of Psychology, the chapter on time perception.
James defines boredom as popping up when we become really aware of time passing, precisely because there's not much content filling that time.
So our attention shifts to just the sensation of time itself dragging.
Exactly. And he notes it's unpleasant because it's just so unstimulating. It's insipidity. He quotes someone calling boredom a protest against the whole present.
Like the moment itself is so empty, it feels like a rejection of our being there.
A powerful way to put it.
Okay, moving into the 20th century now. Bertrand Russell. He gives boredom a whole chapter in The Conquest of Happiness.
He does. Russell defines it basically as a frustrated desire for events, plus two other things.
The contrast between now and imagined better circumstances.
Right. And feeling like our faculties aren't fully engaged. The opposite for him is excitement.
He also makes some distinctions between types of boredom, right? Like lack of drugs versus lack of vital activity. Seems a bit odd.
It's maybe not the clearest distinction, but Russell makes a strong point that the fear of boredom has been a big motivator in history, often leading to bad stuff like wars and persecutions.
But he also says something interesting. Enduring boredom is actually essential.
Yeah, essential for a happy life. He claims great books, great lives, they all have tedious parts. Big achievements need persistent, absorbing work, which isn't always thrilling.
Okay, that makes sense.
And here's where he really challenges assumptions. He argues there's actually less boredom now in the modern era compared to the agricultural age.
Really? Less? How?
He pictures pre-industrial life as incredibly monotonous, repetitive work, limited leisure, especially compared to all the stimulation and entertainment we have now.
That's counterintuitive, isn't it? Given how much we complain about being bored today, despite all the stuff available.
It is. It makes you wonder if our constant connection, while offering stimulation, maybe lowers our threshold. Makes us feel more bored even if objectively we experience it less.
But Russell observes that while we might experience less boredom, we fear it more. We constantly chase excitement.
And he points out the paradox. Chasing excitement too much can make us unable to enjoy simpler things, which ultimately leads back to boredom.
So what's his recommendation?
A more tranquil life, in tune with the rhythm of the earth where real joy can be found. Not necessarily a life of boredom, he clarifies, but one that might look boring to someone needing constant buzz.
Finding contentment in less frenzy. Okay. Now, Heidegger.
Martin Heidegger, a major figure here. His discussion in fundamental concepts of metaphysics is, well, complex.
He sees boredom as fundamentally important, right? Tied to how we relate to being itself, that concept of Dessen, our being there.
Exactly. Dessen is our unique way of existing in the world, engaging with everything, and that shapes how we experience boredom. For Heidegger, boredom, languile, isn't just a fleeting feeling.
It's a fundamental mood, an attunement.
Yes, like anxiety. It reveals something profound about our being in the world. He even distinguishes types. Being bored with something specific versus bored by something deeper, and even a dormant, more profound form.
And his goal isn't to escape it, but to awaken it.
Right. Stop us burying it under distractions. He sees us as asleep in our busyness, avoiding the emptiness boredom can reveal.
Why awaken it? What's the point?
His main reason. He believes it prepares the mind for profound insight. It can lead to understanding being and time, maybe find a path to authenticity. He even says, philosophy is born of the nothingness of boredom.
Wow, that's a powerful claim.
The source mentions other points too. Deep boredom makes time feel like time. It feels like a lack of mood, but is a mood. The thing that bores us is the boring itself. Lots to chew on there.
Definitely. Okay, last 20th century thinker, Bernard Williams.
Right. His essay, The Macropolis Case, looks at the boredom of immortality rather than just the nature of boredom.
So boredom as indifference, Detachment. Inner death, caused by endless sameness.
That's his conception here. He uses the character E.M., who lived 300 years and is literally dying of boredom, choosing death over eternal life.
Highlighting just how serious boredom can be. It could motivate choosing death.
Exactly. And Williams adds something really thought-provoking.
That sometimes being bored is appropriate.
Yeah. That not being bored in certain situations might show a poverty of consciousness, a lack of reflection. Sometimes maybe we have a moral or ethical reason to be bored.
Interesting. Okay, finally, let's touch on philosophical work since the 1990s. It seems like there's been a resurgence of interest.
A real flourishing, yeah. Figures like Svensson and Toohey, whose books we mentioned, are key, plus others like O'Brien, Elpidoro.
And a main debate is this existential or deep boredom versus everyday situational boredom.
Exactly. Situational boredom is like being stuck in a dull meeting. Existential boredom is deeper, more pervasive meaninglessness, not tied to one thing. Continental thinkers like Svensson often focus more on that deeper kind.
And the other area is analyzing the concept itself, like O'Brien's idea.
Right. O'Brien suggests boredom is unpleasant, involves tiredness, restlessness, lack of interest in something you're subjected to, and crucially, the tiredness and restlessness are caused by the lack of interest.
Yeah, a more kind of mechanistic view, focusing on the causal links.
Yeah, a more analytical approach compared to the more experience-focused accounts of deep boredom. The debate definitely continues on how best to grasp this thing.
So wrapping this up, it's clear boredom is way more than just a trivial feeling. We've seen philosophers across centuries grappling with it.
From ancient thoughts on life cycles to modern debates on existential significance, even its neurology.
And some really surprising insights popped up. Boredom as a sign of intelligence.
Or maybe a lack of it, depending who you ask.
Right. Or as a motivator, a confrontation with emptiness, even an appropriate response sometimes.
Hopefully this deep dive has offered some of those aha moments for listeners. Maybe challenged how you think about this common experience.
Yeah, absolutely.
So maybe a final thought to leave everyone with. Considering all these different views, what does your own experience of boredom tell you? Is it just a lack of stimulation? Or maybe something deeper? Hinting at your desires, your intelligence, how you're engaging with the world. Perhaps reflecting on your boredom could be, surprisingly, a pathway to understanding yourself better.
A chance to figure out what really engages you, and maybe what's missing.
Exactly. Something to think about next time you feel that familiar pang of, well, boredom.
Guys, see you in another podcast. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel.